It was almost midnight in a small diner on the edge of Brooklyn. The neon sign outside flickered with tired light, humming softly against the quiet street. Inside, the smell of coffee grounds mixed with fried onions lingered in the air, wrapping the place in the kind of comfort only old diners carry. The floor was worn, the red leather booths cracked at the edges, but to the people who walked in with empty stomachs, it was still a refuge. Behind the counter stood Emily, a young waitress in her late 20s, with tired eyes that still carried sparks of kindness. She had been working double shifts for weeks just to cover rent and the medical bills piling up for her younger brother. Her shoes were cheap and scuffed, her apron stained with traces of the day, but her spirit, though tested, remained generous. As the clock ticked closer to closing, she stacked plates and wiped down tables, counting the few dollars in tips she'd made that night. She sighed, staring at the wrinkled bills. It wouldn't be enough, but she had long learned to stretch little into something. That's when the door creaked open. A man walked in slowly, his steps heavy, his clothes ragged. His beard was long and unkempt, his coat torn at the elbows, and his shoes barely holding together. His face was thin, the kind of thinness that came not from choice, but from days of hunger. His eyes avoided hers, as though ashamed to even ask for what he needed. Emily's heart tightened. She had seen people like him before, hungry, ignored, invisible. Customers often complained if someone like him walked in, but she couldn't just turn him away. She carried the leftover food from a plate she was about to throw out, and without hesitation, placed it in front of him. "Here," she said softly, almost apologizing for how little it was. "It's not much, but it's warm." The man froze, staring at her with wide, glassy eyes. For a moment, it was as if the entire diner held its breath. Slowly, his lips trembled into something between gratitude and disbelief. What Emily didn't know, what she couldn't have imagined, was that this act of simple kindness was about to unravel a truth buried deep in her own past. A truth that connected her to this man in ways she never dreamed possible. And in the next moments, this hungry stranger would reveal something that would change Emily's life forever. Before we continue, what would you do? Would you give your last meal to a stranger, not knowing who they really are? Comment below, because Emily's choice will lead her to a revelation she never saw coming. The man's hands shook slightly as he reached for the plate. His fingers were thin, the skin dry and cracked, the nails uneven. He gripped the fork like it was a lifeline, and when he finally lifted the first bite to his mouth, Emily could swear she saw his whole body exhale, like a storm had eased, if only for a moment. But he didn't speak. He didn't say thank you, didn't even look at her again. He just ate, fast at first, then slower, as if savoring every taste of something he hadn't had in days. Emily leaned on the counter, watching him quietly. She wasn't sure if it was pity or curiosity pulling her attention, but something about this man felt different. His shoulders were broad despite the weight loss. His posture, though bent with exhaustion, carried a strange kind of dignity. He didn't seem like someone who had always lived on the streets. No, his eyes betrayed something else, a history, a story untold. In the diner, time seemed to stretch. A couple in the corner whispered about the homeless man being served, shooting disapproving glances her way. Emily ignored them. Her boss, if he found out, would probably scold her for feeding strays. But she didn't care. Something inside told her this was the right thing to do. "Rough night?" she finally asked, her voice careful, as if speaking too loud might shatter the fragile trust between them. The man paused, his fork hovering mid-air. Slowly, he lifted his head. His eyes met hers for the first time, dark, intense, almost haunted. And then just as quickly, he looked away. He muttered something low, almost a whisper. Emily leaned closer. "Sorry, I didn't hear you." He swallowed hard, placed the fork down, and rubbed his forehead like the weight of his thoughts was unbearable. "You remind me of someone," he said, his voice hoarse, like words unused for too long. The words caught her off guard. "Someone? Who?" Emily frowned, searching his face for recognition, but nothing clicked. She wanted to ask more, but something told her to wait. This man was carrying a burden, and if she pushed too hard, he might close up completely. Instead, she quietly poured him a fresh cup of coffee and slid it across the table. "On the house," she said gently. His eyes softened, a flicker of something almost vulnerable passing across them. He cupped the mug with both hands, as though it were gold. Emily turned away for a moment, wiping a table that didn't need wiping, but her mind raced. Who was this man? Why did she feel this strange pull toward him, as if the invisible thread of fate had just tightened around them both? And then, as if fate wanted to confirm her intuition, Emily noticed something small, almost hidden. When the man reached into his coat pocket to retrieve a worn-out handkerchief, a piece of paper fell to the floor. She bent down to pick it up before he could. It was a torn photograph, the edges frayed, the colors faded. But what made Emily freeze was the detail at the center. A young girl, no older than 10, with the same hazel eyes she saw in the mirror every morning. Emily's chest tightened. Her fingers trembled as she handed the photo back. Where did you get this?" she asked, her voice cracking. The man's reaction was instant. His face drained of color, his eyes wide with shock, as though a ghost from the past had just stepped out of the shadows. "Because," he whispered, his voice breaking, "that little girl is you." If you were Emily, how would you react in this moment? Could you believe a stranger knew your childhood face? Share your thoughts in the comments, because this night is about to turn her entire life upside down. Emily froze. The man's words still echoed in her ears like thunder she couldn't escape. "That little girl is you." Her trembling fingers clutched the photo tighter. She looked again, desperate to find some flaw in his claim, some mistake, some reason to dismiss what he had just said. But there it was, a little girl with messy braids, a plain cotton dress, and those eyes, those exact same brown eyes with flecks of gold in the iris. The same eyes Emily saw staring back at her every morning in the mirror of her tiny apartment. Her chest tightened, her breath shallow. How could this ragged man, a stranger sitting in her booth, eating leftover food, possibly have a picture so intimate, so impossible for anyone outside her family to own? Her lips parted, her voice almost a whisper. Where did you get this photo?" The man's gaze softened. His eyes, tired and wet with unshed tears, held hers with a weight that felt unbearable. Slowly, he pressed the photo against his chest, as if shielding it. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked, heavy with emotion. "I carried it with me for years, because, Emily, you are part of me. You're not just a waitress serving me dinner tonight. You are my niece." The words slammed into her like a wave of ice. Emily stumbled back a step, her tray rattling in her hands. Niece? That was insane. She barely remembered her uncle, a ghost from her childhood her mother rarely spoke of. The only fragments she carried were stories told late at night, when her mother thought Emily was asleep. Stories laced with pain, regret, and bitterness. A brother lost. A man who vanished from the family decades ago. Her throat tightened, her laugh coming out sharp and broken, more like a sob than amusement. No, that's not possible. My uncle disappeared when I was little. My mother never saw him again." The man lowered his eyes, and a single tear slipped down his cheek, landing on the stained napkin in front of him. He held the photo tighter, as if it were the only thing tethering him to this world. I know, And I was that uncle. I disappeared, but not by accident. Emily's pulse roared in her ears. The diner seemed to shrink around her. The clatter of plates, the hiss of the coffee machine, even the rain against the window, all of it faded, leaving only the pounding of her own heart. She forced herself to stand straighter, to cling to whatever control she had left. Resting both palms against the table, she leaned forward, her eyes sharp, defiant. If this is some kind of trick, you've chosen the wrong family to fool. I don't know how you got this picture, but you're not going to manipulate me with made-up stories. Yes, but instead of anger, he offered her something far more disarming, a sad smile, a smile that looked worn, heavy, the kind of smile only guilt could shape. I don't expect you to believe me tonight, he said softly, but I'm not here by chance. I didn't walk into this diner just because I was hungry. There's a reason I found you, a reason that goes far deeper than you think. Emily folded her arms tightly, trying to build a wall between herself and the hurricane of emotions battering her chest. Fear, confusion, curiosity, disbelief. Part of her wanted to shout for him to leave, to erase the entire conversation. But another part, buried deep inside, whispered that there was something painfully true about every word he spoke. And then he dropped the sentence that shattered what little certainty she had left. Emily, I know what happened the night your mother threw me out. I was there. I was the reason for her tears, and only you can help me make it right. Emily's breath caught. Her legs went weak. He knew. He spoke of something no outsider could possibly know, something wrapped in shame and silence, something her mother rarely mentioned, and always through tears. Her skin prickled with goosebumps. If you were in Emily's shoes, would you believe this man, or would you walk away before his words unraveled everything you thought you knew about your family? Emily's knees felt like they could give out at any moment, but she refused to let him see her weakness. She gripped the edge of the booth as if anchoring herself to reality, her knuckles turning white. The man, this supposed uncle, watched her with quiet intensity, his silence somehow heavier than his words. Finally, Emily broke it, her voice sharp with suspicion. You're saying you know about that night. The night my mother never talks about. Fine. Then prove it. Tell me something only my family would know. The man's lips trembled. His eyes lowered, as if searching the table for strength. When he spoke, his words were soft, but each one cut deep. It was winter. The heater in your old apartment had broken down again, and your mother wrapped you in 2 blankets just to keep you warm. I remember she held you against her chest, rocking you, humming the same lullaby our own mother used to sing to us. Do you know which song I'm talking about? Emily blinked, her breath catching in her throat. The lullaby. How could he know about the lullaby? That old, almost forgotten melody her mother would hum when Emily was too restless to sleep. A tune with no lyrics, just a haunting, wordless melody that carried comfort and sorrow all at once. Emily hadn't heard it in years, yet the moment he spoke of it, the memory bloomed so vividly she could almost hear it echoing in her ears. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The man went on, his voice tightening as his own memories bled through. That night, I came to the apartment drunk, angry at the world, angry at myself. I accused your mother of things she didn't do, and when she tried to defend herself, I shouted louder. You cried in her arms, and I'll never forget it, the way your little hand gripped her blouse, as if you knew you had to protect her from me. That was the night she told me to leave, and I did. I left and never came back, until now. Tears welled in his eyes, spilling over, unashamed. Emily's chest constricted, her world tilted. No stranger could have known these things, no passerby, no con artist. The details, the intimacy of those moments, they weren't things you could fake. Her mother never told anyone. It was their secret pain, buried in silence, and yet here he was, Emily pressed her palms to her temples, shaking her head as if she could physically push the truth away. No, no, this doesn't make sense. If you really were my uncle, if you really cared, why did you stay away all these years? Why now? Why come back only to sit in a diner eating scraps off my tray? The man inhaled sharply, his chest rising with the weight of decades. His voice cracked, but he didn't look away. Because I was a coward, Emily. I chose pride over family. I thought leaving was easier than facing the damage I caused. But life has a way of stripping you bare. I lost everything, my job, my home, my dignity. And when I thought about who I had left in this world, only your mother and you came to mind. I came back to find her, to ask forgiveness. But when I walked through this city, I found you instead. Emily's heart hammered. Her throat ached with unshed tears, but her walls stood tall, unbroken. You expect me to believe that after all these years, you show up out of nowhere with nothing but a photograph and a sob story? That doesn't erase the pain you caused my mom. That doesn't erase what we went through alone. His gaze darkened, not with anger, but with sorrow, so profound it seemed bottomless. I know, and I don't deserve forgiveness. But you deserve the truth. Because the truth has a way of surfacing, Emily, whether we're ready or not. Emily clenched her fists, torn between storming away and collapsing into the booth beside him. Her emotions warred, rage, grief, curiosity, a faint but undeniable hope. And then, with trembling hands, he reached into his worn coat and pulled out something else. A folded letter, edges yellowed, ink faded by time. This was for your mother. I wrote it the night I left, but I never delivered it. Maybe it's too late now, but maybe it's time you read it. He placed the letter on the table between them, a fragile bridge between the past and the present. Emily stared at it, frozen. The weight of decades pressed against her chest. The letter felt like a ticking bomb. Should she read it? Could she handle what truths lay hidden in those words? If you were Emily, would you open the letter right there in the diner? Or would you walk away, terrified of the past it might unleash? Emily stared at the folded letter as if it were glowing with fire. Her pulse pounded in her ears, each heartbeat whispering, "Open it, open it." But her body refused to move. It wasn't just paper. It was a relic of choices that had haunted her mother for years, choices that Emily herself had lived with every day. Her hands trembled above the table, stopping just short of touching it. "Why now?" she whispered, her voice low, almost breaking. "Why give this to me and not my mom? Why not face her yourself?" The man lowered his eyes, shame shadowing his features. "Because I was afraid she would tear it apart before hearing a single word. Because sometimes people don't want apologies, they want silence. But you have her strength, Emily. You're not afraid of the truth. That's why it belongs to you now." Emily's lips pressed into a thin line. She wasn't sure if it was strength that kept her seated, or fear that she'd collapse if she stood. The diners around them were still buzzing with chatter, clinking cups, the sound of the rain tapping against the window. Yet for Emily, the entire world had shrunk to that letter and the man across from her. Slowly, almost unwillingly, she reached out. The paper felt brittle, fragile, as though it might disintegrate if she held it too tightly. She unfolded it carefully, each crease a scar of time. Her eyes scanned the first lines. "My dear sister, if you're reading this, then I failed to say it face to face. I failed in more ways than I can count. That night, I wasn't myself. I was broken, angry, drunk, and foolish. But none of that excuses the words I threw like knives. I loved you, but I didn't know how to show it. I loved that baby girl in your arms, though I was too weak to admit it. I left because I thought you'd be better off without me. But the truth is, Leaving was the greatest mistake of my life. Emily's throat tightened. She blinked rapidly, her vision swimming. Each word felt like a dagger and a balm all at once. Painful but tender, cruel but necessary. The letter continued. I don't know where I'll be when you read this. Maybe alive, maybe gone, maybe rich, maybe poor. But know this, not a day will pass that I won't regret what I said, what I did, and how I left. If fate allows, maybe someday I'll make it right. If not with you, then with her, with Emily. Tell her I loved her, even when I was too proud to stay. The paper blurred as Emily's tears fell, dark spots spreading across faded ink. Her lips parted, trembling as she whispered, He wrote my name. She hadn't expected that. Somehow she thought she was just collateral damage, a child too small to be remembered. But there it was. Her name, written decades ago by a man who had vanished into shadows. Her gaze shot up, locking with his. The uncle, her uncle, was already crying, his chest heaving with sobs he tried and failed to contain. His hands covered his face, but his shoulders trembled with the force of guilt and release. The diner felt suspended in time. No one else seemed to notice, and yet Emily felt as if every pair of eyes in the world was upon them. She folded the letter again, holding it against her chest as though it were both shield and weapon. Her voice was raw when she spoke. You don't get to cry like the victim. You don't get to disappear for decades, leave us to fend for ourselves, and then sit here expecting me to just forgive. He dropped his hands, revealing the lines carved deep into his face, lines of age, regret, hunger, and exhaustion. His eyes glistened, but he didn't argue. You're right, he whispered hoarsely. I don't deserve forgiveness. I just needed you to know. Needed someone to carry the truth in case I don't last much longer. Those words pierced her like ice. In case I don't last much longer. Emily's breath caught. She looked at him, not as a stranger, not even as the man who had abandoned her mother, but as flesh and blood, frail and human, carrying a weight too heavy for one man. Confusion, anger, compassion, all tangled inside her. She wanted to scream, to throw the letter in his face, to hug him, to walk away forever. Instead, she pressed her palm flat against the table, steadying herself, and asked the one question that had been burning inside her since the moment he'd spoken her name. Why me? Why here? Why now? His answer was simple yet devastating. Because kindness led me to you. When you gave me that food, you didn't see a beggar. You saw a man. You saw family, even when you didn't know it. That's who you are, Emily. And I couldn't let myself die without telling you the truth. The air between them quivered, heavy with revelation. What would you do in Emily's place? Hold on to anger for what was lost, or take a step toward healing, knowing time may run out? Emily didn't realize how loud her voice had been until she felt the shift in the diner. The scrape of a chair leg, the pause in silverware against plates, the subtle lowering of conversations. It was as if the entire room had tilted toward their booth, holding its breath. She quickly swiped at her cheeks, embarrassed that strangers were seeing her cry. But the tears kept coming, stubborn and hot. At the counter, a waitress paused mid-pour, the stream of coffee dripping over the edge of a cup. Two men in business suits leaned slightly toward each other, whispering. A mother with a toddler on her lap glanced nervously at Emily, as if afraid to intrude but unable to look away. The diner was no longer just a backdrop. It was an audience. Her uncle noticed too. He shrank slightly into the booth, pulling his coat tighter around his body as if the stairs were daggers. His jaw tightened, shame painting itself deeper across his face. I didn't mean for this to happen here, he muttered, barely above a whisper. I thought it would just be you and me, quiet. Emily let out a bitter laugh, sharp and hollow. Quiet? You left us in silence for years. And now you expect quiet when you finally show up? Her voice cracked at the end, the words show up echoing louder than she intended. She saw a young man at the far end of the diner, glance down at his phone, pretending not to listen. The pressure in her chest built like a storm. Every eye in the room felt like a question. Will she forgive him? Will she walk away? Will she break apart right here? She leaned back against the booth, clutching the folded letter in her hand so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her uncle's gaze stayed fixed on her, desperate, pleading, but he didn't reach for her. Perhaps he knew touch would be too much. The rain outside grew heavier, pattering against the windows, blurring the neon lights from across the street. The world beyond the glass was rushing, chaotic, indifferent. But here, inside this diner, time had slowed to the rhythm of Emily's ragged breaths. Finally, one of the customers broke the silence. "You okay, miss?" An older man called softly from a nearby table, his voice carrying genuine concern. Emily swallowed hard and nodded quickly, forcing a smile that trembled at the edges. "I'm fine," she whispered, though she knew she wasn't. Her uncle turned his head, ashamed, avoiding the stares that weighed on him like chains. He pressed his hands flat against the table, his nails dirty, his skin weathered. His whole body seemed smaller, shrunken not just by hunger, but by decades of regret. And Emily saw it, really saw it, for the first time. This wasn't just a stranger with a sad story. This was her blood, her family. Her uncle, who had been absent from every birthday, every Christmas, every night. Her mother cried quietly in the kitchen after pretending to be strong. The diner's air was thick with unsaid words. She wanted to scream them all. "Where were you? Why didn't you come back? Do you know what you stole from us?" But instead, what left her lips was quieter, more dangerous. "What do you want from me?" Her uncle froze. His lips parted, but no sound came. He looked as though the question itself was a weight too heavy to lift. Finally, he spoke, voice raw. "Nothing. Just a chance to give you what should have been yours all along. A chance to not leave this world as a coward." The diner seemed to hum with tension. Emily could almost hear the collective heartbeat of the room, strangers unknowingly tethered to this private war. Her hand drifted back to the letter, her thumb brushing over the creased paper. The words inside screamed at her, demanding to be read again, demanding to be felt until they cut through flesh and bone. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to tell him to leave, to vanish into the rain and never return. But deep down, beneath the anger, something else stirred. A question she didn't want to face. What if this is the last chance? Emily's question still hung in the air like smoke. "What do you want from me?" Her uncle lowered his gaze, his hands trembling slightly on the table. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled something from the inner pocket of his worn coat, a small envelope, yellowed at the edges, sealed with brittle wax. He placed it gently between them, as if the paper itself were fragile enough to crumble under a harsh breath. Emily stared at it, her pulse hammering in her ears. Another letter, another ghost rising from the past. "This," her uncle whispered, "was never supposed to be mine. It was your mother's. She left it. For you. I've kept it all these years." Emily's throat tightened. Her mother's handwriting flashed in her mind, those looping curves she hadn't seen since she was a child. Her mother had died too soon, leaving a hole in her heart that no amount of time had ever been able to stitch shut. Her hands hovered above the envelope but froze before touching it. Fear paralyzed her. What if it wasn't real? What if it was just another trick, another disappointment? "Why now?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "Why not when she died? Why not when I needed her the most?" Her uncle flinched, guilt splintering across his face. He licked his dry lips before answering. "Because I was a coward. Because I thought I could bury the truth and spare myself the shame. But when you paid for my meal today, when you showed me kindness without knowing who I was, I realized I couldn't die with this secret in my chest. His words cracked open something inside her, like glass shattering against stone. She wanted to scream, to cry, to tear the envelope in half and throw it back at him, but she didn't. Her fingers brushed the seal, the wax cool beneath her skin. Slowly, almost reverently, she opened it. Inside was a single folded page. The ink faded, but still clear. Her mother's voice poured out in every word. "Emily, if you are reading this, then life has taken me away sooner than I wished. But know this, you were never alone. You have family beyond the walls you grew up in. People who made mistakes, yes, but also people who carry love for you in silence. One day, someone will return to you with this letter. When they do, don't turn away. Let your heart decide, not your anger." The words blurred as tears filled Emily's eyes. Her chest ached. It was as though her mother had reached across time, across death itself, to guide her in this moment. She looked at her uncle again, her vision swimming. "You kept this from me all these years." He nodded, his shoulders heavy, his eyes wet. "And I can never undo that. But there's more, Emily, much more. Your mother left something else behind, something that belongs to you, land, property, a legacy she wanted safe until you were old enough to understand its worth. I've been guarding it, waiting, failing, but now it's time it goes to you." The diner seemed to tilt again, the air thickening. Strangers leaned forward without realizing it, drawn into the gravity of the revelation. Emily's breath caught. Land, property, a legacy. She had spent her life scraping tips, paying overdue bills, and here was this man telling her that her mother, the woman who had died in their tiny apartment, had left behind something more. Her hands trembled around the letter, clutching it like a lifeline. Her uncle's voice broke as he continued. "Your mother wanted you to have choices, a future beyond survival. I failed to bring it to you sooner, but it's still yours, Emily. If you'll let me show you." Her heart pounded against her ribs, torn between rage and hope, between the pain of betrayal and the pull of possibility. The rain outside pounded harder against the glass, a drumbeat to the moment. Emily closed her eyes, tears running freely down her cheeks. Her mother's words echoed inside her, "Don't turn away. Let your heart decide." If you were Emily, would you trust the man who abandoned you with this truth, or would you walk away and bury the past forever? Emily held the letter close to her chest, as though the paper itself could anchor her trembling body. The smell of old ink, the faded edges, it was undeniably her mother's handwriting. She knew those loops, those careful strokes. But still, a voice screamed in her mind, "What if this is another manipulation?" She lifted her eyes, fixing her uncle with a gaze that was equal parts pain and fury. "Words aren't enough," she whispered, her throat tight. "You think you can just walk in here after years and hand me a piece of paper? No, I need proof, something real. Show me you're not lying." The diner had gone eerily quiet again. Forks rested on plates, conversations frozen. The rain outside hammered against the glass like impatient fingers. Her uncle flinched, but then he nodded slowly. His eyes seemed to age another 10 years in that moment. "You deserve more than words," he said, his voice low but steady. "And I came prepared. I was afraid you wouldn't believe me, afraid you'd hate me forever, but I couldn't carry the truth alone anymore." From inside his coat, he pulled out a worn leather folder, the kind bankers once used decades ago, now cracked and faded. He placed it on the table with a heavy thud that made Emily's stomach flip. She hesitated, staring at it as though opening it might unleash ghosts too heavy to bear. Finally, with trembling fingers, she slid it toward herself and opened it. Inside were documents, official ones, deeds, photographs, legal seals. Her mother's name signed in places she never knew existed. A faded black and white picture slipped free, falling onto the table. Emily picked it up with shaking hands. It was her mother, younger, smiling, standing in front of a small farmhouse. But she wasn't alone. A man stood beside her, her uncle, though younger, his arm draped protectively around her shoulder. Emily's breath caught. The resemblance was undeniable. She turned page after page, land titles, property in her mother's name, records that told a story she had never been allowed to know. Her uncle leaned forward, his voice rough with emotion. "Your mother wanted it safe from people who would try to take advantage of you. She asked me to keep it until you were ready. I should have given it to you years ago, Emily, but I thought I could protect you from the burdens that come with it. I thought waiting was the right thing. I was wrong." Emily's chest rose and fell in ragged waves. Anger battled with grief, disbelief with hope. "And now, you just hand this to me like it's nothing," she spat, her hands slamming against the table. "Do you know how many nights I went hungry? How many times I worked double shifts just to keep a roof over my head? And you, sitting on this?" Tears blurred her vision, but her voice cut like glass. The entire diner leaned closer, caught in the storm of her words. Her uncle didn't defend himself. He simply sat there, shoulders heavy, eyes moist. "You're right," he whispered. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I couldn't let you go another day without knowing. I had to give you back what was always yours." Emily clutched the documents, her knuckles white. Her heart screamed for her mother, for answers, for justice. The waitress inside her, the woman used to swallowing pain with a tired smile, was gone. Here, at this booth, Emily was a daughter demanding truth. Her voice dropped low and shaking. "If this is real, if everything you're saying is true, then prove it. Take me there. Show me what you've been hiding." The challenge lingered in the air, thick with electricity. The uncle's lips trembled, but then he gave a solemn nod. "Tomorrow morning I'll take you." The words hit her like thunder. Tomorrow, one day, stood between her doubts and the truth. If you were Emily, would you go? Would you face a man who betrayed you to uncover what your mother left behind? Or would you walk away, keeping your heart safe, but your future uncertain? Comment below what choice you'd make. The next morning arrived heavy, the kind of grey dawn where the clouds seemed to press down against the city, as though even the sky carried secrets too weighty to hold. Emily had barely slept. The documents from the night before were still spread across her small kitchen table, the coffee stains and old ink bleeding into her restless thoughts. She had read them over and over, searching for cracks, for lies, for something that would expose the man who called himself her uncle. Yet every page felt real, every signature whispered her mother's presence. But trust was a fragile thing, and Emily's had been broken too many times to repair overnight. She packed nothing, just her jacket and her resolve. And when she stepped outside into the damp morning, she saw him waiting. The man who had turned her world upside down less than 12 hours ago now stood near a black sedan that looked out of place in her rundown neighborhood. He didn't wave, he didn't smile, he simply opened the passenger door, silently inviting her in. Emily hesitated. Every instinct screamed caution. But there was another voice too, quieter yet stronger, the voice of her mother, urging her forward, urging her not to let fear keep her from the truth. She slid into the car. The leather was cold, the silence colder. Neither spoke for several minutes as the city blurred past the windows, tall buildings giving way to smaller homes, the hum of traffic fading as they left the bustle of downtown. Emily clutched her mother's necklace, the one she had worn since she was a girl, the one thing that always made her feel connected. Finally, unable to bear the silence, she snapped, "If you're lying, if this is some cruel trick, I swear I'll never forgive you, not even in death." Her uncle's hands tightened on the steering wheel. His jaw clenched, but his voice came soft, almost broken. "I've lived with enough regret, Emily. I don't need more. You'll see the truth with your own eyes soon." The ride stretched on, every mile deepening her tension. Rain began to fall, streaking across the windshield in long, mournful lines. She watched the drops race each other down the glass, her mind racing with them. After nearly 2 hours, the city was far behind. The car rolled down narrow country roads, lined with crooked fences and fields, overgrown with wild grass. Emily pressed her forehead against the window, trying to steady her breathing, and then she saw it. An old farmhouse appeared in the distance, its white paint chipped and peeling, the porch sagging under years of neglect. Yet there was a warmth about it, a familiarity that tugged at the corners of her memory. She had seen this house before, on the faded photograph she held the night before, her mother's smile in front of this very porch, her mother's happiness captured in black and white. The car slowed to a stop. Emily didn't move at first. Her heart thundered as if it wanted to escape her chest. Her uncle finally spoke, his voice shaking. "This was your mother's place, her home, her refuge, the one thing she never wanted to lose. Everything inside is yours now." Emily's breath caught. The farmhouse loomed like a ghost from her mother's past, and she felt both drawn to it and terrified of what she might find inside. She pushed open the car door, her boots crunching against the gravel. The smell of rain-soaked earth filled her lungs, grounding her even as her legs trembled. Each step toward the porch felt like walking through time, her mother's laughter echoing faintly in her ears. Her uncle followed, but kept his distance, as though afraid to intrude on the sacredness of the moment. Emily placed her hand on the wooden railing. It was rough, splintered, but solid, just like the memory of her mother. Tears welled in her eyes. "If this is real," she whispered to herself, "then my whole life was stolen from me." She turned back to her uncle, her voice sharp with the fire of someone who had carried pain for too long. "Show me everything, now." The front door creaked open, revealing the shadowed interior of the house that had been waiting for her all these years. And with that step across the threshold, Emily crossed from doubt into discovery. Would you have gotten into that car? Would you risk everything to uncover the truth, even if it might destroy you? Comment below. Your voice matters in this story. The door groaned on its rusty hinges, as if it had been waiting decades for someone to return. The air that spilled out from inside was thick with the smell of dust, old wood, and something faintly sweet, like lavender long faded into silence. Emily hesitated on the threshold, her hand gripping the edge of the doorframe, the other holding tight to her mother's necklace. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. Stepping in felt like stepping back in time. The floorboards creaked beneath her boots, announcing her presence in the house where laughter had once filled the rooms. The wallpaper was peeling, yellowed by the years, but faint patterns of blue flowers still clung stubbornly to the walls. A wooden rocking chair sat in the corner, unmoved, as though waiting for someone who would never return. Dust motes danced in the thin beams of light that filtered through half-drawn curtains. Emily froze. Her eyes darted from one corner to another, searching for traces of the woman she had lost too soon, and then she saw it on a low shelf by the window, a small ceramic vase. Painted with clumsy strokes of blue and pink, the vase was cracked, but Emily knew it instantly. Her voice cracked. "I made this in school. Mom, she kept it?" Her uncle, standing just inside the doorway, nodded silently. He did not dare intrude on the weight of the moment. Emily approached the vase slowly, almost reverently, and brushed the dust away with her fingertips. A flood of memories crashed into her. Her mother's smile when she had handed the messy little gift over as a child, the way she had said, It's perfect because it's yours." Her throat tightened. She sank into a wooden chair at the table, which still bore faint scratches carved into the surface, tiny initials, little drawings etched by a child's restless hands. Emily traced them with her finger. The silence of the house grew heavier, almost unbearable. And then she whispered, not to her uncle, not even to herself, but to the walls, "You kept me here, Mom, even when I wasn't here." Her uncle finally spoke, his voice low, almost trembling. "Your mother, she never stopped loving you. Circumstances, lies, they tore us apart. But she kept this place as a piece of you. She wanted you to find it one day." Emily's jaw clenched. The bitterness she carried still burned, colliding with the tenderness of seeing proof of her mother's love. She stood, wandering deeper into the house. Her footsteps echoed in rooms layered with shadows of the past. On a dresser, in what must have been her mother's bedroom, she found an old jewelry box. The clasp stuck at first, but when she pried it open, she gasped. Inside lay a photograph, faded, edges curled but unmistakable. It was her, a little girl no older than 7, sitting on her mother's lap. The woman's arms wrapped around her with a fierceness of love that leapt from the picture. Emily felt her knees weaken. She pressed the photo to her chest, sobs breaking free from where they had been buried for years. Her uncle stepped forward then, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "She wanted you to know the truth. Everything she left behind, it's yours now. But more than that, Emily, her love never left you." Emily turned to him, her tears streaking her cheeks, her voice shaking with both anger and longing. "Then why? Why was I left to struggle, to think I had nothing? Why didn't she fight harder to keep me?" Her uncle's eyes closed as if the question pierced him too. He whispered, "The answers are in the letters she left. They're here, in this house." Emily's heart hammered. Letters from her mother. The idea felt impossible yet undeniable. Her gaze shot across the room, searching every corner. The possibility electrified her veins. Somewhere within these walls lay words her mother had written, secrets that could shatter or heal her. And for the first time, Emily felt not just grief, not just anger, but hope. If you discovered your mother had left behind letters just for you, would you read them right away or wait until you were ready? Tell me in the comments. Your choice could change the story. Emily's fingers trembled as she moved through the house, her heart beating with an urgency she couldn't control. Every corner, every drawer, every shelf became a question. Was this where her mother's voice had been hidden all these years? Her uncle watched her silently, as though he knew the storm brewing inside her and respected her need to face it alone. Still, his eyes followed her with the heaviness of a man who had carried a secret for too long. In the bedroom, Emily knelt by an old cedar chest pushed against the wall. Its surface was scarred, stained with water rings, but the lock had long since rusted. With a determined pull, she wrenched it open. The scent hit her first. Lavender sachets, long dried but still faintly fragrant, mixed with the mustiness of old paper. Her throat tightened. Inside, bundled together with a ribbon now frayed and brittle, was a stack of envelopes. Her breath caught. Each envelope bore her name, Emily, written in a familiar hand she hadn't seen in over a decade. Her mother's handwriting, slanted, elegant, unmistakable. The world seemed to tilt. Her hands shook so violently she almost dropped them. "She wrote to me," Emily whispered, her voice raw, a mixture of disbelief and yearning. Her uncle stepped closer, his own eyes glassy. "She started writing after you were taken away. She wanted you to know the truth, but she couldn't reach you then. So she left them here, hoping one day..." Emily pressed the letters against her chest, as though anchoring herself to the mother she had lost. Tears blurred her vision, dripping onto the faded paper. With trembling fingers, she slid one letter from the bundle. The paper was thin, yellowed by time, the ink slightly smudged but still legible. She sat on the edge of the bed, her uncle quietly retreating to give her space, and she unfolded it. Her eyes devoured the words. "My dearest Emily, if you are reading this, it means life has finally brought you back to me, even if only through these words. There are things you were never told, truths that were kept from you, not because I didn't fight, but because I was silenced. Please, my daughter, don't believe for 1 second that I left you out of choice. You were my light. My every breath was for you. The world is cruel to women like us, poor, unheard, judged by appearances. They told me I couldn't keep you. They made me sign papers I didn't understand. I screamed your name until my voice broke, but they took you anyway. I never stopped loving you. I never will. Love always, Mom." Emily's sobs broke through the silence, her body shaking as the words tore through her chest like both a knife and a balm. She pressed the paper to her lips as if kissing her mother's voice. The room spun with memories she thought she had lost, the lullabies, the warmth of arms that had cradled her, the scent of lavender from her mother's dresses. They had never truly left. They had been waiting here, preserved in ink and paper. But alongside the love came rage. Rage at the faceless powers that had stolen her childhood. Rage at a system that had silenced a mother and separated a daughter. Rage at herself for believing for so long that she had been unwanted. She lifted her head, her eyes blazing through tears. All this time, I thought she abandoned me. I thought I was nothing. And all along, she was fighting for me. Her uncle's voice cracked from the doorway. "Emily, she asked me to protect these letters until you were ready. She believed, no, she knew, you'd come back one day." Emily clutched the letter to her chest, her body trembling, her soul torn between grief and rebirth. And in that moment, one thought took root inside her. The truth doesn't just heal, it demands to be carried forward. If you discovered hidden letters from someone you thought had abandoned you, would you keep reading them all at once? Or save them for when your heart could handle it? Tell me in the comments, because Emily's next choice will change everything. Emily sat there, the bundle of letters trembling in her hands as though it carried a heartbeat of its own. The first letter had already shattered the false story she had been forced to believe her whole life. But now, with so many more tied together by the fragile ribbon, she faced a decision. Open them all now, or ration them slowly, like sips of water in a desert. Her heart screamed for both. She untied the ribbon, her breath uneven, and chose another envelope, this one dated just a few months after the first. "My precious Emily, I don't know if these letters will ever find you, but I write them anyway because in writing, I feel closer to you. Every day, I wake up hoping you are smiling somewhere, that you are safe, that someone sings you the lullabies I can no longer sing. I keep the small blanket you were wrapped in the night you were born. It still smells like you sometimes. And when I hold it, I imagine your tiny fingers curled around mine. I want you to know, I never stopped searching. I went to offices, begged in courtrooms, knocked on doors of people with power. They all turned me away. But I will never stop fighting for you, Emily, never. If you ever feel alone, please remember, somewhere in the world, your mother is loving you with everything she has left. Mom." Emily pressed her hand to her mouth, tears spilling over again. The letter wasn't just words. It was resistance. It was a rebellion against the silence forced upon her mother. She reached for another and another. Each letter painted a clearer picture. Her mother's endless battle against bureaucracy, the nights she cried herself to sleep holding Emily's photograph, the prayers whispered into the void, hoping they would somehow reach her lost daughter. But then, as Emily reached one written years later, she noticed something different. The handwriting was shakier, the ink pressed deeper into the paper, as if written with trembling hands. "Emily, my love, time is slipping through my fingers. I don't know how much longer I will be here. My health is not what it once was, but before it is too late, there is something you must know. Something I have carried in silence, out of fear it would hurt you. But the truth deserves to be told. You were not taken from me only because we were poor. There were others involved. Someone close to us. Someone you may meet one day without knowing who they really are. And when you do, Emily, you must be ready. The truth will break your heart, but it will also free it. If you ever find your uncle, ask him to tell you what I could not finish writing. He knows the rest. And above all, never forget, you were my greatest joy, my brightest light. I love you beyond this world. Mom. Emily's chest tightened so sharply she gasped. Her hands shook as she looked up, her tear-filled eyes locking onto her uncle standing silently in the doorway. The air between them was thick, heavy with the unspoken. He knew. He had always known. You, her voice cracked, barely above a whisper. You know what she meant, don't you? Her uncle's face paled. His lips trembled as if torn between confession and silence. The weight of decades sat in his eyes. Emily, he began, his voice hoarse, there are truths that destroy and truths that set us free. Your mother wanted you to know both. Emily clutched the letters to her chest, her heart a storm of grief, fury, and desperate need. The room itself seemed to pulse with the gravity of what she had just uncovered. She wasn't just reading her mother's words anymore. She was standing at the edge of a revelation that could redefine everything she thought she knew about her family, her past, and herself. If you were Emily, faced with letters that hinted at a devastating secret, would you press for the truth immediately, or would you walk away until you were stronger? Comment below, because Emily's choice now will unravel a story no one saw coming. The room felt smaller now, the air heavy as if it were pressing against Emily's chest. She held the letters tightly, her knuckles white, her whole body trembling. Her uncle, tall and weathered by years of hardship, stood with his back against the doorframe, as though blocking the past from escaping into the night. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence was unbearable, filled only by the sound of the rain tapping against the diner's windows. Finally, Emily's voice broke through, fragile but sharp with urgency. You knew. Her uncle closed his eyes as if the word itself was a wound reopening. Emily, not everything was mine to tell. Days, Yasim, but it was hers to write, she snapped, lifting the bundle of letters. Her voice cracked under the weight of emotion. She wanted me to know. She trusted you. And you... Emily's throat tightened. You've been carrying this truth all along. His eyes softened, pained. He stepped closer, the dim diner lights catching the streaks of grey in his beard. Your mother, he began slowly, choosing each word like stepping across a fragile bridge, was brave, fiercer than anyone I've ever known. But she was surrounded by people who wanted to silence her. When she lost you, it wasn't just the system, it was betrayal, Emily, from someone who should have protected you both. Emily's breath caught. The words hung in the air, heavy with betrayal and promise. Betrayal, she whispered. Who? Her uncle hesitated, looking down at his weathered hands as if the answers were etched into the lines of his skin. He pulled out an old photograph from his coat pocket, its edges frayed, its colors faded by time. He placed it on the counter before her. It was a family picture. Emily recognized her mother instantly, younger, but still with that same gentle strength in her eyes. Beside her stood a man Emily did not recognize, tall and stern, his hand resting possessively on her mother's shoulder. Her uncle's voice was raw as he spoke. That man, he wasn't just your father's brother. He was my brother, my blood, And he's the reason you were taken. Emily's pulse roared in her ears. She stared at the photo, her mind spinning, 1,000 questions colliding at once. You're telling me, her voice broke as she pressed her hand to her mouth, that my own family, your own brother, destroyed us? Her uncle nodded slowly, shame etched into every line of his face. Yes, and for years, I carried the guilt of silence. I thought protecting you from this truth would spare you pain. But your mother, she wanted you to face it, to know who was truly responsible. She didn't want her love buried under someone else's cruelty. Emily's knees weakened. She gripped the counter to steady herself as the world she thought she knew cracked open like shattered glass. Imagine discovering that the person responsible for tearing your family apart was not a stranger, but your own blood. Would you seek justice or forgiveness? Comment your thoughts, because Emily's choice now will define not just her story, but her legacy. Emily's hands shook as she clutched the photograph. The faded edges seemed to burn against her skin, a reminder of everything she had lost. She raised her eyes to her uncle, and they glistened with both fury and sorrow. Or how could you let this happen? How could you stay silent all these years? Her uncle's shoulders slumped, his frame seeming smaller under the weight of his own confession. He lowered himself into one of the diner chairs, his breath ragged as though each memory cost him air. Because I was a coward, he admitted, his voice gravelly with guilt. Because I thought silence was safer than truth. And because I believed that one day, maybe I could make it right. But the longer I waited, the more impossible it felt. Emily's heart pounded against her ribs. She wanted to scream, to break every dish in the diner just to release the pressure building inside her. Instead, she gripped the counter, her nails biting into the worn surface. "Tell me everything," she demanded. Her uncle nodded slowly. His eyes stared not at her, but into the past. "Your mother was in love," he began, "but not with the man in that photo. She loved your father, truly, deeply. They had you, and they wanted nothing more than to raise you in peace. But my brother, he couldn't stand it. He wanted control, wealth, status. And when your father defied him, he used his power to tear your family apart." Emily's breath trembled. "He had connections in the system," her uncle continued, voice heavy with shame. "Judges, lawyers. He convinced them your parents were unfit. He painted them as reckless, unstable, and then he made sure you were taken." Tears blurred Emily's vision. She bit her lips so hard it nearly bled, trying to hold back the sobs clawing their way up her throat. "All this time," she whispered, "I thought it was fate or bad luck, but it wasn't. It was him, my own blood." Her uncle leaned forward, his eyes wet with regret. "Your mother wrote those letters because she didn't want you to grow up hating yourself for what happened. She wanted you to know you were never unwanted. You were stolen. And she loved you until her last breath." Emily pressed the letters against her chest, as though trying to fuse them with her heartbeat. The pain was unbearable, but beneath it burned something new, something fierce. "Then he has to face it," she said, her voice low but steady. "He has to know, that I survived, and that his cruelty didn't break me." Her uncle looked at her, a flicker of pride breaking through his shame. "You are your mother's daughter," he murmured. Emily stood tall, her tears now streaks of fire on her cheeks. For the first time, the weight of her past felt less like chains and more like armor. If you were Emily, standing face to face with the truth about betrayal in your own bloodline, would you confront your enemy or let silence bury the past? Share your thoughts below, because Emily's choice is the turning point of this story. The next morning, Emily stood in front of the towering glass building downtown. the headquarters of the man who had orchestrated her pain. The morning sun reflected off the mirrored windows, almost blinding her, but she refused to look away. She pressed her mother's letters against her chest like a shield. Inside, the lobby was pristine and cold. Polished marble, golden fixtures, people rushing in suits. Emily's presence was out of place, her waitress uniform worn, her shoes scuffed. Yet she walked forward with a dignity that silenced even the busiest receptionist. The doors to the executive office opened, and there he was, older, grayer, but his eyes still sharp with arrogance, the man who had destroyed her family, her blood, her enemy. He looked at her with disdain. "What are you doing here? You don't belong in this place." Emily took a deep breath. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. "You're right," she said, unfolding one of the letters. "This place isn't mine, but this truth is, and you can't hide from it anymore." She read aloud her mother's words, words written decades ago, filled with love, pain, and defiance. The room grew still. Executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, whispers filling the corners. For the first time, the man's mask cracked. His lips trembled. His eyes flickered with fear. "Stop," he muttered, his voice uneven. But Emily didn't stop. She read until the last line, until her mother's signature burned through the silence like fire. When she finally lowered the page, Emily stepped closer, her voice steady. "You tried to erase me, to erase her, but here I am, and her love lives on through me. You didn't win. You never will." The man's shoulders collapsed as if the weight of his sins had finally crushed him. His empire, his pride, his cruelty, none of it could stand against the truth spoken aloud. Emily turned, letters pressed tightly to her chest, and walked out of the office without another word. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need power. She had reclaimed her story. That was victory enough. Outside, the city air felt different, lighter, freer. She looked up at the sky, her mother's memory shimmering in the morning light. And for the first time, Emily smiled through her tears. Her journey wasn't about wealth or status. It was about dignity, truth, and the unbreakable bond of family, even when the world tried to sever it. If Emily's story touched you, let her courage inspire you. Leave a comment with the word truth if you believe love and honesty are stronger than any betrayal. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us what really matters.